wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Welcome to the Sunday Stoic podcast, where we take ancient philosophy and apply it to modern life. The Greeks and the Romans were not that different from us. Sure, they prayed to different gods than some of us do today. They dressed a little differently. They had different rituals, different foods. But down at the core, they were human beings with the same emotions, the same drives that we have today. And there were some deep thinkers back in the day that really thought about what it took to be happy, and were using their advice to enhance our modern lives. I'd like to thank some of our newest patrons, Lyman, Reese, and Polly. Pavel, welcome. And as new patrons, they have access to extra content at the end of some of the episodes each month. They can also chat with me on Discord, and you make hosting the website and the podcast itself and the maintenance of equipment possible, which keeps the show going. Otherwise, I would have given up a long time ago as expenses mounted. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. If anyone else wants to support the show, go to patreon.com/SundayStoic. Or you could just throw a couple bucks my way if you so wish by using my email address, sundaystoic@gmail.com on PayPal. And if you don't wish, that's fine too. Thanks to the patrons, the show is free, and I put it out every week. I've only missed a couple weeks, and that was planned when I took some time off for Christmas last year. This week, we're going to hear once again from our friend Epictetus. Next week, we will begin to look at Marcus Aurelius. And just to warn you, next week's episode will be normal. The week after that, I will be traveling to Phoenix, Arizona. And I might record with my phone in the hotel room while I'm there, because I'm there for like 5 days. But I might do a recording as I walk up to the Grand Canyon for the first time, because I'm going to go visit that for the first time. So, We'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see nature's works there. So Epictetus is talking about the failure to achieve what we set out to achieve. He talks a lot in his writings about desire and aversion. And so what he recommends for those of us trying to learn to be better people is that we set aside our desires altogether. Stop trying to want things. First of all, we know that we should only desire internals, right? Things that we have complete power over. Everything else is an indifferent. There might be things we would prefer to have, but we should focus our desires on our own internal processes. He recommends we focus on our aversion. So stop trying to be averse to externals. So when someone says, hey, I need you to load up this wheelbarrow full of bricks and move it around to the other side of the house and then go move all of that firewood to the other porch or whatever, you say, well, that sounds like a lot of work. Okay, I'll start now. You're not averse to things that you might have tried to walk away from in the past, things that you don't have power over. You don't get upset when you have a cold. Like, it's not in your power. Why bother being upset about it? So he recommends focusing on aversion. So don't be averse to externals, but start being averse. Focus your aversions on internals. The Discourses of Epictetus, Book 3, number 25. To those who fail to achieve their purpose. Consider which of the things that you propose at the start you have achieved and which you have not. Likewise, how it gives you pleasure to recall some of them and pain to recall others, and if possible also those things which have slipped out of your grasp. For men who are engaged in the greatest of contests ought not to flinch, but also to take the blows. For the contest before us is not in wrestling, or the pancratium, in which whether a man succeeds or fails, he may be worth a great deal, or only a little. Yes, by Zeus, he may even be extremely happy or extremely miserable, but it is a contest for good fortune and happiness itself. But what follows? Why here, even if we give in for the time being, no one prevents us from struggling again. And we do not have to wait for another 4-year period for another Olympic festival to come around. But at the moment a man has picked himself up and recovered himself and exhibits the same eagerness, he is allowed to contest. And if you give in again, you can enter again. And if once you win a victory, you are as though you had never given in at all. Only don't begin cheerfully to do the same thing over again out of sheer habit, and end up as a bad athlete going the whole circuit of games and getting beaten every time, like quails that have once run away. I am overcome by the impression of a pretty maid. Well, what of it? Wasn't I overcome just the other day? I feel strongly inclined to censure somebody. For didn't I censure someone just the other day? You talk thus to us as though you had come off scot-free, just as if a man should say to his physician, who was forbidding him to bathe, Why, didn't I bathe just the other day? If then the physician is able to say to him, Very well, after you had bathed then, how did you feel? Didn't you have a fever? Didn't your head ache? So, too, when you censored someone the other day, didn't you act like an ugly-spirited man, like a silly babbler? Didn't you feed this habit by citing the example of your previous acts? And when you were overcome by the maid, did you escape scot-free? Why, then, do you talk about what you were doing just the other day? In my opinion, you ought to have remembered as slaves remember their blows, and to have kept away from the same mistakes. But one case is not like the other, for with slaves it is the suffering which produces the memory, but in the case of your mistakes, what suffering is there? What penalty do you feel? Why, then, did you ever acquire the habit of avoiding evil activities? So we're trying to work on our aversions. And those aversions are internal. Those failures of character that we need to start recognizing in ourselves. So he says we're considering the things that we started out for and we failed to achieve. And if you're human, you know what he's talking about. If you're trying to be a Stoic, you know what he's talking about. We set goals and then we immediately fail. And this is a huge contest we're up against. This is like the Olympics of life. But unlike the Olympics, it happens every day, all day. So when you do fail, you don't have to wait for another 4 years to start again. You can start right away. But he warns us not to make a habit of failure. We can just say, well, it's okay. I can start again tomorrow. And it's true, you can. But that's not an excuse to give in when you have a temptation, when you have a desire that's external that will actually not benefit your character. And you give into it, such as he gives the example of chasing a maid. Oh, she's pretty, and you're overcome by desire. You can tell yourself, well, I was overcome the other day, and I can be overcome today, and I can start again tomorrow. Well, that itself is an evil. That's you acknowledging you have a problem, acknowledging that you gave in last time, and then willfully giving in again. So we need to watch that. We need to be harder on ourselves. We will fail, but we don't want to willingly fail. He goes on to say that slaves remember the ills they have done because they're often beaten, right? What a harsh world this would have been. But the slaves are hit, and they remember, oh, last time I did this, I got hit. I won't do it again. But then he ends this reading by saying, what penalty do you feel? You are committing errors, but what penalty are you experiencing? And I think what he's saying here is, if you have not calibrated your compass to acknowledge that failures of aversion are failures of character, and that's an evil. That's a true evil because it's a failure of an internal, right? A failure of a of a true good here. In this case, your internal aversions, your own thought processes here, the power of your will. You have failed at that, and that's where true evil is. So that should hurt more than anything that someone else could do to you. And if you haven't worked on that calibration, you don't feel the evil. So why would you mend your ways? Why would you adjust your character? Why would you change trajectory if you don't recognize your failures as failures? Some actionable advice from this reading today is to make sure we do think about those things we do, those character flaws, as something we can actually correct and something that we want to correct more than we want to fill our account with money, more than we want to buy a new car. We need to focus on our character. And when we fail, we should chastise ourselves a bit, not overly so, right? But look yourself in the mirror, be the judge and jury, and say, "Sir, you have failed." In my case, sir, you may not. You don't have to call yourself sir. You have failed. Pick yourself up and try again. Don't let it happen again. It's okay to fail, but don't go out there expecting to fail. Be like Cortez sailing to the New World, then burn your ships. Saying, yeah, we might fail, but we're not going back. We're moving forward. If we fail, we're picking up and we're going forward even further. To turn back and go back to our old ways, back to the land of hedonism, is not an option. So a wrap up of Epictetus. We have duties. We need to think about our roles in nature as humans, our roles as individuals, and figure out what those duties are. Rather than contemplating the sage as much, we're contemplating our natural roles, our duties as individuals and as humans. And that's where our instruction manual lies. What should we do right now? What should we be doing to live up to our potential as a member of the cosmopolis? Meanwhile, internally, we need to make sure we're paying attention to our desires and our aversions, focusing our desires on those duties. In terms of externals, we need to make sure we're living up to the duties that we have as individuals. So that might involve interacting with externals, right? But it's not the externals that we value, it's how we act towards them. We also need to focus our desires on our own internal thoughts and wants, and the same thing with our aversions. Try to stop being averse to external events and focus our aversions on our own internal will. Once we've accomplished all of that, working on our desires and aversions and then relating that to our environment, our roles as humans, then we can start paying even more attention to our mindfulness, the discipline of assent, and ensuring we're not tricked by false impressions, working on our logic and things like that, but not until we've adjusted our moral compasses. So we can do none of this just by listening to some guy in Arkansas in his closet talking into a microphone, right? We have to do something about this. We have to get out a pen and paper, jot down our faults. We have to ask our loved ones, truthfully, what are my flaws? And jot that down, analyze that, see if we agree with them, and then make an actionable plan. We can ignore faults that fall in the realm of externals. You need to make more money, right? Things like that. But if you're told you're a mess, you make a mess wherever you go, right? You making a mess, you not cleaning up your mess, that is wrong. That's you not living up to your role. The mess itself is an external, but your relationship to that mess is indeed in the realm of good and evil. So if you're criticized about leaving the house a mess, that's a valid criticism. If you're criticized for being angry or watching too much TV, always looking at screens, These are all things that are valid. This, the screen itself, indifferent. But your relationship to that screen, that is your role. That is within your power. You're focusing your desires on externals, and you are not living up to your role as brother, son, daughter, cousin, citizen, whatever. You're wasting time staring at a screen. So you can think about all these things more deeply, make a list. I would prioritize that list because we're full of flaws, and if we try to work on all of them at once, we will not succeed. You can only exercise one area of your body at a time. The same thing goes for your character. Focus on one thing. Maybe that keystone problem, one of those problems that if you fixed, it would solve a great number of problems in your life. Maybe that's your consumption of alcohol or overeating or screen time. If you eliminated or curbed one of those habits, it would have an impact in many areas of your life. You can start on that, and you can start on that today. Remember, you don't have to wait for the next Olympics to come around. And you don't want to delay. Why would you put off being better when you can be better right now? Carpe diem.
Thank you for listening to The Sunday Stoic. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review The Sunday Stoic on iTunes. Become a member of the Sunday Stoic team, earn rewards, and be an integral part of the show by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. Contact the show by emailing sundaystoic@gmail.com or by leaving a voicemail at 501-503-3132. To find out more, visit www.sundaystoicpodcast.com. And as Steve always says, Carpe Diem.